Welcome back to another episode of the Midlife Maverick podcast, the show for men who refuse to settle for decline and are ready to take control of their health, strength, and purpose. Today, we're diving deep into men's health, biohacking, and the power of community. Because let's be real, most guys are struggling, but nobody's talking about it. And that's why I'm pumped to have Troy Flower on the show. Troy is a men's health advocate, coach, and founder of wellbeing, a movement dedicated to helping men build stronger bodies, sharper minds, and better lives through smart, sustainable health strategies. In this conversation, we get real about why so many men neglect their health and how to change that. The mistake stuck in midlife, how small, simple biohacks can boost energy, testosterone, and longevity, and the power of brotherhood and accountability in transforming your health. If you're a man who's tired of feeling sluggish, stressed, and stuck in the same cycle, this episode is for you. So grab your coffee, or better yet, ditch the caffeine for better sleep, and let's dive in.
I am exceptional, thanks, Stretch. Absolutely exceptional. What about yourself?
Mate, I can't complain. It's been some beautiful weather here and spent a bit of time at the ocean, taking my young daughter down there, teaching her how to swim, and yeah, just training, eating well, looking after myself. All the things you and I both love, mate.
All the good things.
Exactly that. Troy, I came across you, I think, on Instagram, and it was just one of those things. I think you and I both have, the same passion. We're working on our own health and fitness, but we're also trying to help, a lot of men improve their health and fitness. And I just wanted to connect and, have a bit of a chat and see where you're at with your business, which is wellbeing. And just talk about, some of the things you're seeing with the men and stuff you're working with. So I'm greatly appreciative of you making time to come on the podcast, and I look forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Look, that's awesome, Stretch. And yeah, back at you. This is an interesting space, isn't it? Men's health and well-being. It feels like one of the hardest areas to enter into. We sort of sit in this space of going, well, if I focus on health and well-being, it means I have some type of weakness. And if I'm weak, therefore I'm not as attractive and my status goes down. So for us to come in and go, hey, let's help you with some things that can improve your health and well-being. It's like, mate, don't need that. I'm fine. I don't have the time. I'm far too successful.
Yeah,
and then we die of heart attacks and strokes, and we end up with type 2 diabetes and early stage dementia because we're not doing the stuff we need.
It's a tricky. I agree with you, mate. It's a very tricky space that we're sort of stepping into here, and I think it's society's pressure on masculinity, like what it is to be a man, and what it is to look tough on the outside and not to admit when you're struggling. And then to admit that you're working with a coach or a health coach or a life coach or, the wellness team, and what you guys are doing might look like a weakness, but in reality, it's just such a powerful strength, and it takes a lot of courage to step into something like this. And it's about finding the guys who are ready to do that, I feel. And yeah, I'm interested to chat to you a bit about that and dig into that a little bit more. But before we do, there's a question I like to start the podcast with. Sure. If you and I were going to be boarding an airplane, there's two parts to this question. The first part is, if we're boarding this airplane, where would it be going? Do you have a favorite holiday destination, or is there something on the bucket list that you want to tick off?
So if you and I were boarding an airplane, I have a sense we'd probably be going to the US.
Okay.
but not for any reason other than I think while we have some challenges here in Australia, I think in fact a lot of the challenges that they're experiencing over there right now are amplified, and we're out to try and do our best to make a difference in the world, and I think they're staring into a fair amount of shit there right now, and I think you and I have a role to play, and potentially we could share some insights, maybe give people some different perspectives that they might think are worth following.
Yeah, I like that, mate. And I think, there's a lot going on over there at the moment. I love the fact that RFK is stepping into the health role. And I think there's going to be a lot of big changes over there, but it seems to be like this big awakening going on right now. The big awakening of big pharma, the big awakening of big agriculture, big food, all the stuff over there that's been happening in America, which is probably 10x times what's going on here in Australia. But it's just like you say, the statistics around their health numbers over there, like it's ridiculous how many people are overweight and sick, and the amount of, I think they're 4.8% of the world's population, but yet they're taking 50% of the pharmaceutical drugs in the world. And it's just like, well, hang on a minute. The health system there is definitely screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're not far behind. I think, we tend to be that shadow of the US, and we've popularized that culture for a long time, and following that path. We've maybe the other destination we should be on a plane to is Canberra. Maybe we should be rattling some cages there and trying to get more funding towards better healthcare choices across the board. With Well Team, we're really clear from the start. We're going to target men, but we're not going to exclude anybody. So we have some women who've been part of our programs. We have the mother and daughter who went through one of our programs. It's important that we don't encourage this division of genders. I think this is just about a recognition piece. Going, look, blokes have just not been typically good at looking after their well-being. We need to try and change that for the benefit of everybody, really.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, mate. I think, there's a lot of similarities between obviously men's health and women's health. And, when I was setting up Midlife Mavericks, it was the same sort of deal. Do I open this up to both? But I can't say my expertise in the menopause area and the elderly, as we get older in terms of female hormones and stuff like that. So maybe I'm not the best guy to talk to about that stuff. And just focusing, I think a little bit selfish too. Like, I'm very passionate about my own health. And a part of this is, hey, I want to learn as much as I can about health, longevity, well-being, and put myself in the best position to show up as the best father, the best partner, the best mate, the best colleague, whatever I'm going to do for as long as possible. And I don't want to go down that path of the decline of Alzheimer's, dementia, obesity, and just suffer in those last few years of my life. I want to be as active as I can for as long as I can, and just keep contributing, because I think it's a pretty sad way, for us to end our life with all these diseases and stuff happening. So that was the main focus for me to step into men's health. But I'm curious to know, like, what led this journey for you? Because I think a lot of us that step into these sort of health roles, we have a little bit of our own journey, maybe our own struggles along the way. So what's a little bit of your story, Troy?
Yeah, I guess some people have a great awakening that draws them to a particular area of passion or interest or a cause. And for me, I think mine was like death by paper cuts. And a couple of those paper cuts were pretty serious. But for a long time, I studied sports science at university back in 1990s, and that's always been my interest has been around human performance. And in those days, I got stuck into the Tony Robbins, or Anthony Robbins as he was known back then, and absorbed a lot of that different content that made to think about the mind in a different way. And I could see quite early on how rewiring your mind could make a big difference. And I went through periods of sadness when I was a young man, a young kid, really. And I remember sitting up in a tree in my backyard once, and I would have been about 16 years of age, and thinking, and in some ways fantasizing about jumping and killing myself. That was a pretty hard sort of thing. And so for me, there's always been this belief around how powerful the mind is. And I think I started to seek out some solutions to that back then. And 10 years after, well, it would have been 4 years after that, when I was 20 years of age, I came home from University of Melbourne and found a loaded rifle in our garage. And my father and I grew up, or our family grew up in a regional area, and so guns weren't unusual, and we used those to control rabbit population. But finding a loaded gun at home was really unusual, and was a great breach of the laws of gun ownership at home, certainly for us as a family. And my dad was going through a tough phase, so that kind of logged with me. I didn't know what to do. I had no tools. There were no real tools, and eventually we got him into or my mother got him into a psychologist. But from the outside, you saw a guy, in some ways not similar to Robin Williams, who was very outwardly gregarious and extroverted and positive, and would bend over backwards to help people, yet he was going through a real inner turmoil that took him very close to the edge. And 10 years after that, sadly, we lost my father-in-law to suicide after he lost his wife. And so these two events really started to push me in a particular direction. And I didn't have I knew I had to do something. I wanted to do something. I didn't have any sort of, what was that? There was a driving force behind me, which was, you got to get your career sorted. You got to get your money sorted. You got to get your family set up. All of these social pressures that said, don't do something stupid like pursue your passion. It's about wealth creation. And I drank from the cup. And so, I spent time in the legal drug trade, the big pharma, as you say. And I got a sense of how all that works and operates. And I did well within that. I won managing directors awards and all sorts of stuff for innovation. And so that was a lucrative path, but it also opened my eyes to the way things really work in the world as well. From there, I worked for a cancer charity after my mother-in-law, who died, and she died from leukemia. And so I spent 7 years in a cancer charity with Cancer Council, helping to do what I could to add some value there, and then moved into fintech, which was heartless. Then moved into banking, which was even more heartless and soulless. But again, it ticked all those boxes. I was working under the CEO of a bank. I had an office on the top floor where it was security coded. It was where the top of the bank sat. I was in there. I was one of those, but it felt. It was great in title, it was great in income, it was great in status, but it was really shit when it came to, my own values and what I wanted to do in life. And so that's kind of where this sort of intersection of seeing this path didn't get me the happiness that I wanted, and it didn't help sort of absolve the pain that I'd felt and seeing people close to me die from suicide, and thought there's got to be a better way. So how do I use all the shit that I've learned, all the books that I've read, how do I pull all of that together to try and create something, and what better audience than myself?
Yeah, that's it, mate. I've been there. I've worked in banking, so I understand.
I saw that.
Yeah, spent a number of years working in business and finance, mate. I think I got to the same point as you. It's an incredible income. You can climb the corporate ladder. It ticks all the boxes that society says that we need to tick. But I would leave work at the end of the day just not feeling fulfilled. Like, what am I doing? I'm making a big business more money, but how is that really helping people? Is this what I want for the rest of my life? Is this what life is? And I think a lot of guys get stuck in that position, like we're the providers, or we're seen as the providers, and there's that pressure on us to have a certain income, have a certain job title, own certain material things, the house, the fancy car, whatever it is. And we're just trying to tick all these boxes, but that satisfaction just never comes. But there's also that underlying fear or pressure of like, well, what else can I do? How do I turn my life around, follow my passion, or align my life at least with my values? So I'm curious, like, from you being in that position and then taking the steps with all this information that you've got to be able to, I suppose, jump in the deep end and do something different. Like, how did that come about for you, and what sort of steps did you take?
Yeah, well, so a couple of things. And I think one of the worst sayings out there is do what you love and the money will follow. Because it's simply not true. And it sets up this false belief that your work, you should absolutely love and be passionate about your work and go to work every day and be joyful and happy and think, well, I'm changing the world. Well, guess what? The reality is that that's not the case. And you go back to the hunter-gatherer days, and for 200,000 years, I'm sure as a caveman, we didn't get up when it was raining and the family needed to be fed and it was cold and we needed to catch ourselves some form of protein that we thought, I'm just loving today, hunter-gatherer, woo, got it nailed. Yeah, it would have been a pretty shit day out there trying to catch food. If you came home empty-handed, it'd be pretty hard. and the next day you'd have to front up, and your survival was on the line. And I don't think it's any different today. So many people get themselves in a situation where they're overextend, obviously from the banking game. We know this stuff. The job of the bank is really to get you to overextend in some way, and to get us all. This is how capitalism works, and is that we have more than we can afford, and that's the way the game works. And and it serves us well to a point. But this is a challenge. And so when I was in an organisation that started to do the COVID death spiral, at the time it was as a research organisation looking at aging, and I looked and thought, well, all the data on aging suggests that it's going to be pretty crappy for people as they age in 20 years' time if they don't have their health. Our healthcare system at the moment is not really supporting a great care model. I mean, it's better than a lot of countries, no doubt, but it's not a great model for individuals. So, it's a difficult thing. So I looked, and at that time looked at a redundancy opportunity, which was worth bugger all. It wasn't that, big golden handshake. It was like 2 weeks of pay. And thought, no, stuff it. That was the time that COVID was hitting in April 2020, and my wife and I said, no, let's try this. Let's just try something different. Let's try and get men together as a primary sort of target audience, and let's see if we can get them doing some stuff that they wouldn't normally do. Yeah. And let's make that competitive, which is something that men would normally do. So let's take something they wouldn't normally do, make it competitive, so hopefully they'll do it.
Yeah. Interesting, mate. It's an interesting step, and you took that risk. What were you feeling at that time? Like, what was going on for you when you're deciding to quit that secure job and then dive into men's health and start building this well team?
Look, I was disillusional, the way that most of us are, and perhaps need to be at that start. I was arrogant in thinking that I can do this faster and better than anybody else has ever done it before. And I looked at the pharmaceutical industry and thought, I'm not sure that this is the right path. I looked at the big food tech industry and thought, kind of they're the bad guys. So I'm going to stroll in there and just fix it all.
Yep. Nice work. Let's dive in, mate. I want to hear more about Well Team and what you guys are doing there. So, if you were to define sort of what Well Team is, how would you explain it?
So I think there's two things at the heart of Well Team. There's kind of two components that are interesting. So the first part is this great need. So as you pointed out before, the statistics for men's health for chronic disease is not great. I think it's 47% of men will likely develop at least one chronic disease in their lifetime. And that's pretty easy to gloss over that because the pharmaceutical industry is here. And, that's the great savior, is that drugs will save us all. But we don't often think about the complications that arise when these conditions progress. And one pill has a side effect, which then requires another pill, and then the multiple pharmacy options that we have to sustain a pretty average life that we've compromised through our choices. And so our goal on one side is to find simple, easy things that men can implement at scale. So what we call biohacks, which when I started looking at this stuff back in the 1989, when I first started this exploration, it was just called doing stuff. It didn't have a fancy title. And now, of course, it's got to have a fancy title, and what better title than biohacking, because that's something you can charge a lot of money for, something that fancy. But all of the exercises and activities are essentially free. And we've been doing them for 200,000 years, largely. This stuff's not new stuff, but it's what your biology has evolved to require in order to function well. So we encourage people to do that. But what we find in Well Team, which is a big part of what you do, and what all organisations that focus on gathering people does, is that they create a sense of belonging.
Yeah, the community.
And it's actually this belonging that makes, I would argue, the biggest difference.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hard thing to build that community. I think especially with men, because it's asking them to sometimes be vulnerable, to step into the arena and to share their struggles, and be able to support each other. And I think a lot of men, we're great at having surface level conversations. We're great at saying, "Hey, I'm great," and "How's the footy score?" and "What have you been up to?" and this, that, the other. But to talk about, those struggles, can be really difficult. And to build a community where guys feel, I suppose, unjudged and safe to be able to open up and talk about that stuff is no mean feat. So I'm glad to hear that that's, really what you're working on and trying to build that. How is that going for you? What are some of the biggest hurdles that you think you've come across as you start to put together this community?
Yeah, look, I think the hardest thing is what we said before, that the people who need it don't want it. This is a really core thing to understand. The people who need it don't want it. It's like a lot of things. Often we need advice, but we don't want it. It's how do we rewire ourselves to go, actually, my health is not where I want it to be. My relationships aren't where I want them to be. I'm somewhat isolated, or I don't have that close group of friends, which I know I should have. So how do we flip that switch from recognizing that state to taking action? And that's the hard bit. That's the bit that I've been for 4 years now writing article writing messages across LinkedIn, just all the time trying to approach things from a different angle so that people can sort of recognize that this is not it's a problem to solve. And it's actually a really important problem to solve, because if you are lonely and isolated, and this is what I see all the time, is that guys travel through and in their 40s to 60s, they go, got it sorted, got a partner, got a job, got kids, nailed it, got a house, got a car. I should be happy, but I'm not particularly happy. And then you spend all of your time at work because you think the money will fill that need for happiness, and then you can have more expensive houses and cars, and all these things have a short-term effect, a short-term benefit, but they don't actually help you feel better. And the relationships that you build with your partner's friends and with your work colleagues, and then all of a sudden something goes to shit. You lose your job, or you decide to change jobs, and all of those people who were your friends at work turn out to have just been colleagues. And potentially, if your relationship breaks down with your partner and you go your separate ways, well, people often find that the mateship that they had there with your partner's friends' husbands, which is really often the case, they evaporate as well. And you can find yourself really quickly feeling fairly lonely and isolated. And that's a real challenge. And we need to protect, I call it life insurance. We need to build this life insurance where we build a group of close people around us who aren't connected to family and aren't connected to work. And then when work and family have their tough times, and they will, you can be guaranteed of that, then you've got some way of being able to find some comfort, some peace, some support, just mateship, just to sit with people, go for a walk, have a coffee or a beer or whatever. You've got that. And that is worth, that's worth lives right there.
Yeah, 100%, mate. It's a good point that you make. I think, growing up as kids, we play sport, we go to school, we have all these good mates and stuff that we think are going to be our mates for life. And life changes. You live in different locations, people move away, people get different jobs, and you lose touch a lot. Like I've lost touch with so many of my high school mates or all that sort of stuff. I probably only still keep in touch with very few of them. Work colleagues, very, very much the same, changing jobs, living in different parts of the world, traveling. And it just, you do start to lose touch when you do lose those jobs. And again, they're mates you think you might have for life. and you don't sort of look ahead thinking, well, what after this? What after this job? What after this relationship if it's not going to work out? And I think it's one of those things men are really good at. We just sort of live in the moment and we don't really forecast into the future. A lot of us don't really have a clear vision. Like we just keep working at that same job because it's giving me the paycheck, or we stay in that same relationship because I've got kids or I've got the mortgage, or, we just get stuck in that rut and we don't make changes until I think the pain becomes harder than the change. And and that's the only time we do it. We're very, I think, not proactive, very reactive, and trying to get to men in a state of, okay, how can you be proactive? Not only just with your social connections and networks like you're speaking of, but also with your health. Because a lot of these things with our health, it's not like, it's not binary. It's not like, okay, I'm healthy. Okay, now I'm sick. It's that accumulation of, bad diet, not enough exercise, not getting your sleep, all the things that we talk about that builds up over time because we're not staying proactive. And then all of a sudden, we've got a chronic disease. Then all of a sudden, because we haven't been connecting, we're having those thoughts of suicide. Then all of a sudden, all these different health complications can come up. And it's because we haven't been the guy to be brave enough to have the courage to admit that, okay, shit, my health's starting to decline or something's not right here. I need to take action, instead of ignoring it and just like letting it be until it just snowballs into something we can't control. And I find it too, like I've only been doing this with men for a short period of time. There's that hurdle of getting them to be vulnerable, admit that they're struggling, and then be willing to step into something like coaching or into a community and share their story is really, really difficult. And that's why I'd love to chat to you more about that. Like the guys that you've got on the team, like how have they come to you? How have they been progressing? What sort of things are you seeing in the community that you're building?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Well, you know what? I guess the biggest growth that we see is word of mouth. We've made plenty of donations to Mark Zuckerberg and to LinkedIn and thrown far too much money at Google, and all of those just seem as fake and as false as the reality is that they are. But it's when somebody says to one of their mates, "Hey, come, I'd love to see you in Well Team." That's important, and that's where we see our growth. And what we find with all aspects of health and well-being, it's not the big things, as you pointed out. It's death by paper cuts is what gets us in the end. It's people don't develop type 2 diabetes on one day. They get diagnosed on one day. But they've been developing type 2 diabetes for maybe 20 years. And in fact, maybe the habits that started them on that path before their metabolic health started to decline were 5 years or 10 years preceding that. And all of those little things turn into big things eventually. And by the time they're a big thing, the reversal of that process is also a big thing. So the key is really to recognize the little things that you can do and to intervene as early as you can. And that's really the key to this. When I looked at all the data around aging and the fact that we have such an aging population globally, is that the time to intervene is not when people think. They go, hey, look, when I retire, then I'm going to get healthy because then I'll have the time. No, it's actually you've done a lot of damage by the time you retire. And at 65, 70 years of age, by the time you and I get to what is called retirement, the reality will be it'll probably be older than 70 because they're going to need us to pay taxes for a lot longer to support the health of a large portion of the population. So it's the little thing. So I remember a great story we had in one of our programs. The first week, what we do is we get people to focus on taking back control. Really simple concept, take back control. And we get them to go screen-free an hour before bed and have a consistent bedtime for a week. Simple. Yep. And most people will go, too simple, won't bother. Well, we had one particular guy who I'd known for a number of years, and he'd had a very tough job, and he was up all hours of the night. And he he'd made himself available. He'd made himself that guy, that leader who, if you had a problem to solve, he was your go-to. And day or night, he would respond and you'd have your solution. But his life had diminished because he wasn't sleeping well. So the simple exercise of having a consistent bedtime, whatever time that is, was actually an exercise in taking control and going, my bedtime is not going to be dictated by the programming on television, by bloody algorithms on social media serving me crap I don't need to see. And it's not going to be dictated by work. It's going to be dictated by me. And I'm going to set it and I'm going to hold it for a week. And then you go screen free an hour before that, and not television, but sort of interactive device free. Then again, it's another action of taking control, being directed at something. Really easy things to do. For some people, they go, "Oh, I couldn't do that. Couldn't possibly do that." But from an evolutionary perspective, we've had to fight, we've had to swim, we've had to engage in all sorts of serious survival behaviours. Switching off your phone an hour before bed, going to bed at the same time. For 200,000 years, we've been going to bed typically when the sun goes down, and we get up typically when the sun comes up. And it's only been the last sort of couple of 100 years when electricity was invented that we've been able to change that pattern of behaviour. But prior to that, our habits were ingrained in our circadian rhythm and in the cycle of life. So going back to some of those basics and getting some of that nailed and back in place again, that can make a difference. Well, this guy, after a week of trying that, came back and he was a different man. Like, it was extraordinary. And he even said, like, this has changed my life. And it's such a small thing. So we see a lot of these instances where people try something that's different. The other big one where we see a significant change is caffeine. So a lot of us drink a lot of caffeine, but we're oblivious to the fact that caffeine has an operation on our brain. It's an adenosine blocker, and if you drink too much of it, then you're going to be robbing yourself of your deep sleep, which you're not going to notice because you're asleep at the time. You just don't know that you're not sleeping as deeply as you could. So all the little things make a big difference.
Yeah, exactly that, mate. I think it's just getting back to the basics. I think sometimes, like, a lot of men can think that it's just too simple. But yet the ones that are willing to try this stuff and see the transformation it can create in their life, the ones that really benefit from it. But it's like, well, if you're not doing these simple things, like just this overwhelm and this constant hammering that you're giving your body is leading to your low energy, is leading to your grumpy mood, is leading to your aches and pains, is leading to those migraines or headaches or those sugar cravings or whatever's going on, is leading to that weight gain. Whatever the goal is, it's like really getting back to some of those basics, like just getting to bed earlier and letting your body recover, getting deep sleep, not smashing the coffee, as you say, or the caffeine to keep you stimulated so you can get through the day. And although this stuff feels simple, I think it's quite challenging. And when guys are confronted with this stuff, their natural thing is to say no, because it feels like, I can't do that. That's too hard for me. And I totally get it. For a lot of guys being able to get to bed early if they've got family or if they've had a busy day and they just want to come home and relax and sit on the couch and doom scroll or whatever it is, like that feels like it's relaxing, but in the end it's not. And if they don't change those habits, well, if nothing changes, nothing changes. How can you expect your health to improve if you're not willing to? I like to use the idea of like we're experimenting. We're running these different experiments. We're giving ourselves permission to experiment. And there's no failure. We're not failing. We're just trying. And if that works and we feel better because of that, awesome. And if that doesn't work, well, then chances are your lifestyle needs more smaller fixes, like stepping back and thinking, okay, well, what's one other thing I can do that's going to help me move towards the man I want to become, or the health and fitness that I want to have, or the energy that I want to have. And then just start with these really small, whether they're biohacks, like you sort of said, or these sort of feels like insignificant changes, which reap massive rewards over the long haul. I think there's, like you say, death by paper cuts, but what's the opposite of that? If we're doing small things over time to heal ourselves, I think it's the opposite. It's being able to step by step create a life that's a lifestyle, or create these habits that support us not just now, but support us when we're 50 and 60 and 70, and create just this life that continues to support us instead of the quick fix. Let's go on a 12-week ketogenic diet, or let's, do a 12-week boot camp and smash ourselves into the ground, or whatever it is, intermittent fasting. It's just one of those things where, okay, in those 12 weeks, you might feel better, you might see some results, but if you don't change the underlying behaviors that serve you for the long term, you're just going to fall back into the same habits and end up feeling exactly the same way. And I think that often happens because we take on more than we're able to implement and keep implementing into the future. You seem like a big data man. There's a lot where you talk about data, and I've been on your website and I see the big dashboard that you've got set up. And I think it's great because, like you said before, guys like competition, but I also think it's great because it brings about this sense of awareness. And it's giving guys the ability to build more awareness around that. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit. I know you've got a scorecard there that, guys can jump on and do. Can you talk to us a little bit about that scorecard and a little bit about, the system that you've got set up there, Troy?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Look, years ago, and I guess ever since I've started on this journey, I realized that if you take a science approach to health and well-being, you can quickly kind of narrow things down into systems. And if you think about the healthcare community at large, it's into systems. So if you go to a doctor and the doctor says, I think there's an irregularity with your heart, then you go to the cardiologist. And if you have a problem with sleep, then you go to the sleep technician. And if you have a problem understanding your thoughts, then maybe you go and see a psychologist. So we break the body up into these parts, which makes sense from a study perspective and a specialization perspective. No different to what we do in a car manufacturing plant, where we break it up. We go, well, you're responsible for putting the engine in, you're responsible for the seats, you're responsible for interior, exterior, etc. And we do that with the human body because it makes sense, except it kind of doesn't, because if you look at one of the things that, and I was having this conversation with somebody just this morning. If you wake up in the morning and you have no energy, so if you wake up and you just don't feel like getting out of bed, what's the cause of that?
Could be a list of things, mate, but where do we even start? Like you say, it's not just one thing. It's not, I've just had a bad night's sleep, or it's like, yeah, I could go on and on. The list is huge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But our obvious thing is we would go sleep. You're having bad sleep, so let's go and see a sleep technician, perhaps get some sleep studies done. And that might be right. And that might help a person. But they might not want to get out of bed because they got no purpose. They got no reason to get out of bed. They might not get out of bed because their relationship with the family around them or in the workplace is so terrible that they just don't want to confront it. It might be that they have some issue with their blood. They might have low iron levels and can't find the energy because of a physiological component that's missing. So there's lots of different reasons. They might be drinking too much caffeine, which has robbed them of their deep sleep phase, so they wake up and they feel tired. So all of those different things, but there's nowhere in the healthcare system that tries to bring it all together. So we took upon this kind of enormous task of going, what questions do we need to ask? And the response to those questions, what potential impact could the response to those questions have across so many different parameters of life? And let's say you were sleeping poorly and you wake up with no energy. And let's say you have no energy in the afternoon as well. What are some exercises that you could do that might be experiments to see if something shifts there? And so that's where we went through and we built this scorecard tool. And so there's 40 statements in there. And you respond to say whether that statement sounds like you or not like you, or somewhere in between. And we put that on a 10-point scale so that your responses, and then we built this sort of complex algorithm that takes that insight of, if you're sleeping poorly, it could be this, or this, and it weights each of those based upon your response to that question and the next one. took us a long time to build the complexity behind that. But that's kind of, in my mind, it just made sense to do it that way rather than say, oh, you're not sleeping well, go and see a sleep specialist, or don't drink caffeine because that'll fix it. That level of arrogance puts us in this situation of dividing the body into parts. So we built this scorecard tool, and we wanted to make it free so that the people can get a report out of it, and they can consume the information in that it was in a dashboard format, which tends to be more, if you're a visually oriented person, which most humans are, you can see it and quickly work out and go, that's good or that's not good. And then you can drill down further and see areas where perhaps you should be spending some focus. And after that, we built this other algorithm. I love to use the word algorithm. It makes me sound smarter than I really am. And that then looks across the database of different biohacks or activities and then tries to match them in that order. And then on top of that, we looked, over the course of time, I've seen some things have a natural order before others.
Yep.
So as an example, if you're going to try having a cold shower or a cold exposure activity, then you probably want to do breathing and breath work before that.
Yep. Yep.
And if you want to do breathing and breath work, maybe you've got to sort of do some exploration before that, so that sets you up for the breathing, and then that sets you up for cold exposure. So then sequencing things in the right order makes sense as well. So that's the process. So people go onto the website, wellteam.me, and they can do the scorecard tool. They can do it anonymously, which is important. A lot of guys don't want to be caught out. They don't want to be identified, and so we don't use any trackers on our website. We don't stalk, hunt people. We do have some cookies in place to see whether our advertising is working, which largely when we spend it on LinkedIn and Facebook and Google isn't. So, we might as well take that off. We want people a genuine tool that's free to access. They can go, actually, I didn't think that might be impacting how I feel, and maybe I should try that.
Yeah. I like that you point that out. I really like that you point that out, because I think a lot of guys feel stuck in their health, their wellness, in their fulfillment, purpose, whatever it is, and sometimes they don't know where to start, or they don't know why they feel stuck. And building that awareness through asking powerful questions and getting them to reflect on their life and where they are right now can sometimes uncover very different things that they might not have thought to look at. And when you can create that awareness, then it gives them maybe a starting point. And whether that's, stepping into the biohacks and stuff that you've got set up in Wellteam, or whether it's, something different to that, it's definitely something that can be quite helpful, because I think awareness is the first thing. If you're not aware of what areas of your life aren't, at a level where they should be, then how do you know what the first step is or where you're going to start? And I think we can be very good at banging our heads against the brick wall, thinking that if I just train harder, if I just eat less, if I just do X, Y, and Z, this is going to make me better. But then we fail, and then we repeat the same thing again, thinking that I obviously didn't do enough. I need to do more. But we're not having a look at that bigger picture. So I like the idea of the awareness that you create with that scorecard. And that's something that we're actually trying to do. Not that I'm copying it off you, Troy, but we are looking to try to do a scorecard as well, with Midlife Mavericks, because I think the awareness is the first step. And if we can create that awareness, then hopefully we can get guys to sort of go, you know what? I need to focus on that, or I need to start doing something different in that part of my life so that I can improve in this area, because I realize, like you said before, it has an impact on everything. It's not like the human body is separate and, our health things are separate. Your sleep quality is related to the food that you're eating, is related to the stress that you're having, is related to your social connection. All these sort of things are intertwined and related to exercise, but you can't just focus on one area and expect everything to fall into place. You've got to be able to step back and look at the broader stuff. Yeah. So,
and if you want to do it quickly, get somebody like yourself who can do that one-on-one coaching stuff.
Yeah.
Because that like I look at the scorecard tool and we've had over 1,000 users of it now. So So, and what we see from that is that there are some people who use it and then they take action. They take action by joining Team. We have a custom program generator tool that they do that, or they join one of our programs. But I'm hopeful that there are a lot of people who get that information and data and they go and do it themselves. But if you know you've got the perhaps the if you can prioritize your health in such a way that you think I want to get to that point quicker, then one-to-one is going to be a faster way. Where you can tailor the answers. It took us a long time to build that tool, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool, and it can't be personalized to the level that it says, hey, because you've got 2 kids and you and your partner are separated and you're going to struggle with your time to pick them up in the morning, so why don't you do it here? It can't get to that level at all. But doing one-to-one with somebody can certainly get you to that level and help you think through things quickly. So, that's what I love about what you guys are doing. And I love, I have a small number of private clients, and it can only ever be small. And I love working with them because you can affect significant change quickly, as you know. So that's really cool way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tricky thing because we're obviously limited by time. As coaches, we've only got so much time, and to help as many people as we can and to support as many guys as we can with their health, like having a group program can make huge differences. And like you say, the community and the camaraderie and the support that you can get from having a group is phenomenal. Like I used to own a CrossFit gym, and the community that we had in the CrossFit gym was amazing. And the ability of what that did to encourage people to get there and exercise and train and hang out with their mates and be a little bit competitive and push themselves a little bit harder, amazing. Was it the best program for them, for everybody? No, it wasn't. Definitely not. But the community side definitely had its value. The individual side does too. And I think, you're right, having a coach can be very supportive. And I hate to say this because I know when people hear this, especially guys, when they hear this, they shy away from it. But at the end of the day, the responsibility is yours. And if you're not willing to do the work, then nothing's going to change. And although a coach and a community can be there to support you, the end game is with you. The end game is you've got to have the balls, you've got to have the courage to do the changes and to commit to doing the work. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. And this leads nicely into the next thing I want to talk to you about, because I know you're big on habits. I know you're big on trying to build sustainable habits. And we've got to think about breaking, not that there's bad habits, I don't like to say they're bad habits, but breaking habits that aren't supporting the vision of the man we want to become and creating the habits that do support the journey that we want to be on. This can be very tricky. Like, I think it's a hard thing for a lot of people. So talk to me a little bit about habits. Like, how do you work with these men? How do you work with the Well team to start to try and think about building these sustainable habits? If you can on that one. So we just started talking about sustainable habits.
So when you think about those habits that don't serve you and where they come from, you never start a habit. So you only ever start a behavior. And then that behavior repeated over time becomes a habit. And so there are a lot of powers. There are a lot, I mentioned the capitalism early on in the conversation because actually it's a really important thing for us to consider. So most things that are free, we don't hear about. Think about cold showers. Well, there's reasonable amount of research out there that suggests they're going to be positive for us and may be more beneficial than hot showers for a lot of different conditions. I was looking at something for depression, and it showed that walking on its own, walking or running, had a greater impact on reducing the symptoms of depression than did a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSR, common medications used. And so why is it that everybody's being prescribed walking or running? Why isn't that cold showers are being prescribed? Why is it that not eating breakfast is something that everybody does? And it's because there's no money to be made in it. And that's critical for us to think about. If we want to take back control of our mind and our body, we've got to consider who's been benefiting from our choices the other way. If you look at the rise in obesity, it's been significant. Now, we didn't start, a person doesn't start being obese. They start being influenced by junk food. They recognize that it's convenient. The ultra-processed foods are fantastic. They're low cost. They have high caloric value, although nutrient poor. So we start these habits, we start these behaviors because it actually makes sense. And it makes sense because everybody is telling us, Coke is life. Well, no, actually, I think I have to argue with that one. It's not life. In fact, it could well be the opposite. So what are these messages and how are they impacting us? Because they're the things that we're fighting against. When we wake up in the morning, we go, I don't feel like breakfast, but I've got to have it because it's the most important meal of the day. And I put a big bowl of wheat and I put a big thing of milk in there and the wheat's got sugar attached to it, so I eat it. And then I feel hungry 2 hours later and I go, wow, maybe I go and get a chocolate bar or a muffin or something. All of these are things that have crept into our lives very slowly. And they're supported because the environment that is created for us to consume and eat those is profitable. But this is the bit, all of this stuff comes back to if the message is delivered well and marketers are fantastic, food technologists are great, they're getting us to consume things that we don't need. And I think the habits that we encourage in Wellbeing are not have a supplement, have a this, have a that. It's actually take away. What can you take away from your current rate of consumption that isn't going to improve your health? It's going to improve your health and well-being. And that's, I think, the really difficult thing, because society is driven by messaging, and messaging is promoted through channels that cost money. So the reason why Wellteam it grows because of a mate telling a mate is because that's who you trust. But if I had $100 million tomorrow and threw it all on advertising and marketing, I reckon I could drive as many people to Wellteam, as competitors. But of course, there's billions of dollars being spent on the exact opposite of the behaviors that we encourage. How do you fight that?
It's crazy, isn't it, mate? It's just like big pharma spending big money on promoting drugs, affecting the education system of our doctors, which they have done for years, paying our politicians, getting drugs subsidized so our taxpayers' money goes to drugs, big media supporting the whole thing, big food, big agriculture, all these things that are creating studies that will show us that X, Y, Z food is actually good for us and that fat is causing the problem and it's not sugar and whatever it is. We are fighting that battle. We are fighting against all that misinformation that's been out there for decades. And it can be hard to break that misinformation because the belief systems that we all build around that information that's getting fed to us day in and day out makes us stubborn. We don't want to open our eyes and have a growth mindset and think about, okay, maybe we're being lied to and maybe this information is all wrong. And doing the research, having the time to do the research and actually look into the data and figure out, what is actually healthy for us. And what we need to be doing, it just becomes too overwhelming. Like, it's overwhelming for me and it's probably overwhelming for you. And we work in this job and we do this all the time. And yet guys still think that they can do this by themselves on top of everything else they're trying to manage. So I like what you're saying there and I don't disagree at all. And our work is certainly cut out for us to be heard in all of that noise and to be able to help men break away from mainstream bullshit, I'm going to say, because it is.
But let me go back those shots because there's a kind of a fundamental concept, and it's part of the challenge is that big pharma don't exist. Big food techs. I've never met a company. I own a company. I've never met it. I've only ever met people in it, and people in it. My days in the bank, I would attend the senior leadership team meetings of the Westpac group, and you would see that these are all really nice people. They're loving, they're caring people, and they're just making decisions that are supported by society. So, pharmaceutical companies, I worked in them, and some of the nicest people working in these companies, I classify myself as one. I developed an education program that helped doctors prescribe more insulin for people with type 2 diabetes. And it rolled out nationally and it received international attention. And I won an award for it. Here I am now saying, well, maybe drugs aren't the answer. But the challenge as a society is that we want the easy wins. Yes. And perhaps as a species, that this is the stuff that we've craved all along, and we're getting exactly what we're driven to get. So the work of reversing that's perhaps counter evolutionary for us. And that's why I think it's hard, because food technology companies exist because they generate significant profits. If they didn't generate significant profits, they wouldn't exist. And who are the beneficiaries of the exorbitant profits that these companies make? Well, any of us who have superannuation are the beneficiaries. And so society is in fact this system that is created it itself. It's not a company that's doing the wrong thing. And in fact, the company that I did work for is one of those companies that's produced the GLP-1s, Wegovy, and Ozempic. And I had shares in that company, which actually funded me to develop wellbeing. So there's the irony going around. Yes. And it's, so it's the desire for an easier life that's perhaps why we seek more money, because we think it's going to make life easier, and why we seek a pill rather than a walk, because then I can make more money if I don't have to walk. And it's the reason why we can seek these solutions that are fast and easy, and the hope and the promise of the magic pill is exactly what we all crave. Because it's simple and easy, which is supported by our entire evolutionary process. We drive through space and time in pressurized capsules where the temperature is regulated. No part of our evolutionary past has said that's going to be a really important step for your evolutionary progress. But we've done it because we don't like to be uncomfortable. Yeah. And what you and I are saying is, actually, it's time to get uncomfortable, to do some stuff that's actually in your best interest, but it's something that you need to do but don't want to do.
It's a good point that you make, and I like that you bring up comfort, because I think we talk about change happens outside of your comfort zone. And if we get into that comfort zone and everything feels like it's easy, then chances are you're on the decline. Chances are your health's on the decline, your well-being's on the decline, everything's going to be going backwards. And I think midlife is the turning point, because I think in our younger years, although, kids these days are getting diabetes and having chronic illness, and it's shocking to see those statistics. But for most of us in our younger years, we can get away with probably eating a little bit more ultra-processed food, not getting as much sleep, all these sort of things. But I think as we get older, midlife becomes that turning point, and we can choose to stay in that comfort zone and continue along that way and try to ignore what's going on. And that might be the comfort zone now. Or we can choose to get into the uncomfortable stuff, exercise, walk, work on your diet, do breath work, get in the cold shower, whatever it is. Because in the big picture, if you stay in that comfort zone now through midlife, well, where are you going to be in your 60s and 70s? That ain't going to be comfortable. That's going to be horrible. And you might not see that until you get there, but dementia, Alzheimer's, like aches and pains, arthritis, whatever it is, that ain't going to be comfortable. But if you can get out of that comfort zone now in your midlife and you can make the changes that you need to make, yeah, that's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to be a hell of a lot less uncomfortable than where you're heading to in the future. And that's what I talk about vision. I think being able to look into the future and say, holy shit, if I don't do something now to look after my health and well-being, what's that going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now? And is that really the person I want to be? What are my relationships? What's my waistline? What's my mood, my energy, all that sort of stuff going to look like? If you're sleep shit now, what's it going to be like in 20 years if you don't manage it? Like, it's going to be horrendous, and you're not feeling good now. You're going to feel like then. And I think you're right. It's hard to go against mainstream media and to go against society and what we're being told and what we're sort of doing in terms of being the sheep and following the herd. But if you don't step away from that, what's it going to cost you?
Yeah, it's about taking back control.
Yeah.
I keep coming back to this all the time with our guys. The things that we encourage are free.
Mm.
So why aren't you doing them if they're healthy for you? Why aren't people walking all the time if they have periods of poor mental health? Because it's been shown to be by far the most effective strategy. Because it's free, and because we think, because of the messaging, consistent messaging. If you want to be happy, you drive this car. If you want to be happy, go to this gym. If you want to be healthy, you go to a gym. We create all these barriers which require us to earn more money to be able to do, but we figure out that when we earn more money, we don't have the time to do it. And so how do we strip back stuff, and how do we, and so companies and organizations like yourselves with Midlife Mavericks and with Wellbeing, what we have to do is we have to make a place where healthy decisions are greater for your status in society than a new car. Because that's the competition in men's health and the competition in healthcare in general isn't the pharmaceutical industry. The pharmaceutical industry exists because we don't want time. We don't want to spend time on something, and our priorities go a bit out of whack. So we have to succeed in creating a status that is a healthy, well-balanced man is the ultimate status. And at the moment, we're up against a Mercedes-Benz is the ultimate status, or if you fly on a flight and you have a look in the in-flight magazines, it's a Cartier watch or a Tag Heuer watch. These are the status symbols. Well, it should be that wearing the Well Team T-shirt or being part of Midlife Mavericks, that says something about you that is powerful, that says I'm not getting sucked in by all these other people are getting sucked in. I'm not a sheep. I'm taking my health and well-being seriously. And I'm not going to be a frigging burden on the healthcare system and my family. Yeah. And I'm not going to sit in the frigging hospital bed rocking backwards and forwards because I made poor choices when I was 40 to 60. Midlife Mavericks and Well Team have to succeed. Because if you think of the alternative, it's pretty fit.
Yeah, there's definitely a place, mate. And it's like you said, overcoming all those hurdles to be able to have our voice heard and build trust here. And then, yeah, I suppose it's success, isn't it? It's the results that we can deliver, the transformations that we can help men achieve over a period of time, the sustainable habits that we help them build, and then the value really sort of coming out of that. Just in this last little bit, mate, I do want to talk a little bit about time. And I think time and money, they're both the big thing. Like, I think for a lot of guys, it's time and money. It's like, I don't have the time to do all this stuff and I put it off because I don't have the time. Or it's like, yeah, the money thing that's I've got to work because I've got to make money. They're the two big things I often hear from a lot of guys around, their health. They put their health and well-being last, or it comes after this because of the responsibilities above that. Are you finding your guys are, sort of saying the same sort of thing? Is that a common message that you hear? And if it is, what sort of advice would you give around that, do you think?
So my golden rule of thumb is to think about it like this. In terms of money, if we think about money, every year we're putting, I don't know what the current rate of contribution to superannuation is, 10% or something. I think it's higher than that. But let's say it's 10%. So if you're putting 10% away, so that it's going to improve your quality of life when you were 65, what are you doing now that will enable you to use that? Because we live in a time where we have greater wealth than we've ever had any other time in human history. We have greater luxury than any other time in human history. And we're all saving madly so that our retirement, we're going to be so frigging wealthy, we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. And the good thing is that a Netflix subscription is really cheap. So if you are in poor health, you'll be able to use all of your money on your Netflix subscription, sit on your fantastic reclining chair and watch it for hours on end until you die early in a miserable state. We have to think about our life now as a long game. The same way that we contribute to our super, we've got to make a conscious effort to go, now I'm going to put life annuation in place. I'm going to use life insurance and do the work now. And I think 2% is the right number that we should be thinking about spending on our health and well-being every year. So if you earn $100,000 worth of income a year, then you should be allocating $2,000 for your health and well-being. And if you don't spend it on yourself in that year, you should give it away. You should give it to a charity. Firstly, that'll make you feel really good and you'll be doing great for the world. But it will also force you to use it because it's not a thing you stockpile. You don't stockpile it like your superannuation, go, right, now I've got $100,000 to spend on my health and well-being. I've just got to overcome type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, early onset dementia. Right, let's put something into it. No, it's about spending that time and money now. And when it comes to time, it just has to be about priorities. And I actually think that it's incredibly selfish, in fact, to not spend time on your health and well-being now. I look at my kids and think, it's great. They're 18 and 19 years of age. By the time I'm 65, I'm going to be able to do stuff with them. And if they have kids by the time I'm 65, I'm going to be able to do stuff with their kids and my grandkids. That's more important to human life than giving them $100,000 each.
Yeah.
The human connection stuff. So as a guy, we've got to go, you know what? It's not all about money. You trace back from an evolutionary perspective. Wisdom sat with grey hair. The older people spent time with the younger people and they imparted knowledge and they showed how things are done. And we didn't get into these difficult situations because we were more connected physically with people.
Yeah.
Not good if you're dead at 65. I love data. And so I read the Grimm tables, which are the death tables. So I love looking at death data. It's another one of these misconceptions because we go, what's life expectancy today? And we go, it's going to be 84 years of age. Fantastic life expectancy. But you go and look at actually when people are dying today, the death rate is lower. And it's under 80 for guys. So we're on average dying in our 70s. And I think off memory, and I really have to double check this, but it's something like 16% of men will be dead before their 65th birthday. That's not a big ad for leaving your health and well-being until you're retired and then getting on top of it. That's a significant portion of people who are pushing up daisies when they're supposed to be out caravanning and on some friggin' luxury cruise somewhere. It really is something that we've got to take seriously because all of the money in the world that's being invested in campaigns that tell you to save for your retirement, no one is doing the stuff that needs to be done, which is make sure you are in a fit enough state mentally and physically to even enjoy 1 year of your retirement if you make it.
Yeah, exactly that, mate. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we look at lifespan and we talk about longevity and all that sort of stuff, but it's like, okay, even if guys are living to 84 or whatever it is, when did the decline start? Like when did dementia and Alzheimer's or, this sort of stuff start? Like if it started at 65, like what is those last 15 years of your life like if you do get to live through that? Like I said, that's going to be a lot more painful, a lot more uncomfortable by not investing in the health. And I like what you said around priorities. I think, we can say that we don't have time, but how long are we scrolling on our phones? How long are we watching Netflix? What things in our life are we actually doing that are really pointless or meaningless? And if we say we don't have time, well, the priorities, getting that in check. Like I think, that little simple thing you talked about before, getting to bed early can make such a big impact. But if you don't set boundaries, and like that guy who was working and the boss and he's accepting the calls, like if you don't set boundaries around your work and you don't create priorities and give yourself that space, I like the way you call that. That's selfish. It is because, what are you leaving on the table? Like what's that doing to your health, to your future, to your kids, to your partner, to all this stuff that you're not taking care of, you're not investing in. because you're not doing the simple things. So your priorities and boundaries create space and create time. And like I said, I think the money thing is good. It'd be an interesting thing if a certain percentage of our super had to be spent every year on health.
That's noble.
Yeah.
It should be, isn't it? Because otherwise we're just creating these pockets of wealth that are going to transfer to our kids, and they're not going to have to do anything in order to get that significant wealth. Now, what does that create in society? You know, when you die at 65 years of age and you've got $1 million in superannuation and it goes straight to your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, what could be worse for society than that? Ultimately, you know, you don't even have these days the rate of adolescence. You know, we don't even have the life experience to know how to spend it. So we create this society driven by wealth and not by those choices. But Stretch, I just want to say one thing, that men don't need help. You know, this is one of the dangers, and I've seen this played out, and I'm really careful about trying to use the word help and trying to eradicate it, because men don't like help. Help actually says you need me, and guys aren't wired like that. So what we need to do is simply to create a space for guys to do what they know they need to do, and to make that space so inspiring and perhaps approachable and easy to access, that men can simply do the stuff they know they need to do. I don't help anybody. I really don't. All I do is I try to create activities that people can experiment with, but I can't help them. You know, if you don't think I'm going to try to get a consistent bedtime, I can't help. I've had countless conversations with people who have really reinforced this in me, that unless you want to change, and unless you decide that it's you that's changing, ain't no one coming to save you. You nor I are not saving one single person. They are simply saving themselves, and they have to make that choice and that call.
Yes.
And that's why you and I need to build brands that are strong, that show power, that show inspiration and motivation, that men will go, shit, I want to be a part of that, because that's who I want to be and that's who I am. And they make that choice to move in that direction. No one's helping them. No one's coming to save them. I'm no frigging guru or messiah. I just want life right.
Yeah.
This is about just allowing people to unlock the potential that exists within themselves and do shit that they know is right to do.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, mate. It's like, we're not here to give advice. Like, I think guys want to come and be given a plan. This is the step 1, step 2, step 3. But coaching is definitely not about that, because I think we are all individuals, and they say knowledge is power, but we have all the knowledge. All the information is at our fingertips. We had it when Google was invented, but now even with the AI, like it's there. All that information is there. It's not a lack of information that's stopping us from making change and improving our health and well-being. Like you say, guys know what they need to do. And I think that's part of the problem. They know what they need to do, but they don't take the action. And the role that you and I play is, we're here to help facilitate that action. We're not here to take that action for you, but we're here to help facilitate that action. It's convincing you that taking that action is exactly what you need to do, but you need to uncover the action, and you need to be able to create the habit, biohack, whatever it is that you're going to be trying to do, and have that permission to experiment and figure out right now, what are the things, what's the first step, or what are the small steps that you can bring into your lifestyle right now? It's not about changing everything at once. It's not about overhauling your life. It's not the 12-week transformation, the quick fix that we're after. It's like, okay, what's step number 1? Can you do that for 2 or 3 weeks? Awesome. What's step number 2? Awesome. And maybe that was around exercise. And so, well, what about nutrition? What about stress management? What about sleep? Like, and it's not like doing everything at once, but it's just like picking one little thing and being able to work on that little thing, get it implemented, and then take the next thing, and figuring out the best path forward. And usually if you can implement 1 or 2 things, I love to see it snowball. I love to see how, when guys start to do exercise, all of a sudden nutrition becomes more important. All of a sudden sleep becomes more important. All of a sudden that community becomes more important. Whatever it is, just starting one little thing can have such a big impact. And even though that little thing, like getting to bed early, can feel so insignificant, the long-term game, the transformation that it can create is worth more than the 12-week boot camp or the 12-week quick fix, because it becomes, like I said before, it becomes that routine, sustainable habit that you implement for life. Yeah.
Big things come in, big things fall out.
Yeah.
But if you do lots of little things, then you've got a great chance of succeeding.
Yeah. Consistency beats intensity.
Yeah, I love it. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
write that one down, mate. Take that one. Troy, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, to have you on the show today. And we've covered a lot. I've got a lot out of it, bouncing some ideas off you, and I hope the listeners have too. So thank you for your time and thank you for sharing that. Is there anything you want to add? Where can guys find out more about you? Just throw in some details, man.
Yeah, thanks, Rich, and thanks for doing what you do. This is really important. And some organisations, the men's health space is an interesting one in that there seems to be a lot of organisations that think they're competing with each other for men's health, and it's never been more ridiculous. Ultimately, as a race and as a species, 50% of us are likely to end up being men, and so there's a fair chance that there's a heap of people listening to this who are thinking, I want to have a crack at change. And for some, wellbeing might be a solution, and for some, midlife mavericks, and for some might use both and together. And if all that happens at the end of that is that we have a greater focus on this, then that's really important. So thank you for reaching out. If people are interested in wellbeing, just go to wellbeing.me. If you want to do the scorecard tool, you just press get started from the homepage. We've got events, walks that are going out in different areas. People can jump on those. That we have online programs that introduce biohacks over the course of 6 weeks. We run those. So jump into that. There's a 14-day free trial. There's all sorts of free shit. I mean, our goal is to change the friggin' world. And if we make money from that, great.
Yeah, no, exactly that, mate. And yeah, same to you, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I know it's a hard slog, but it's definitely needed. Men's health is such a big topic, and more men need to be focusing on their health, whether that's in midlife or whether that's much sooner. I think more people are waking up to the idea of preventative health, and more people are catching on board with the lifestyle stuff. So I think we're in a good place to be able to help guys. And yeah, whether it's through Wellness Team, whether it's through Midlife Mavericks, or whether it's through something else that's out there, we're not competing. We've got the same mission. We're here to support each other. We're here to support men. So yeah, whoever you feel like you want to reach out to, just reach out to somebody. Just reach out and get started. If you need help, help's not the right word for Troy. If you need some guidance and support, or whatever it is, then I think that's the first step sometimes, because it can make a big difference. Like just having that accountability, having that community, having a little bit of support around you. You don't have to do it alone, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and choose things that you can start today, because I can assure you that nothing ever starts tomorrow.
Yes, I like it, mate. What a good note to finish on. All right, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Midlife Mavericks podcast. If this episode hit home for you, don't just sit on it. Take action. If you're a man in midlife looking to regain your strength, energy, and purpose, check out the Midlife Mavericks membership, a community of high-performing men committed to leveling up their health and lifestyle. No fluff, no excuses, just results. Start by taking the Midlife Assessment Scorecard, a quick tool to help you identify the key areas holding you back and what to do about it. Because if you don't track it, you can't improve it. Head to midlife-mavericks.com.au to take the scorecard and learn more about the Midlife Mavericks membership. If this episode helped you, share it with a friend. Iron sharpens iron. Let's build stronger men together. Until next time, take ownership, take action, and keep pushing forward.